we have his car to hear the paper of Lorenzo Zaccaria with the beat of the Pharaoh, Verdi's Aida, and the long thread of culture, fascination for ancient Egypt. Lorenzo Zaccaria graduated in European literary cultures in a joint program of continental universities, such as the Università degli Studi di Bologna, the Université de Strasbourg, and the Universidade de Lisboa. He is currently a doctorate student at the Center for Classical Studies at the Universidade de Lisboa, working on a thesis on the Portuguese humanist Damião de Góis and the social and intellectual relationships he created in Europe during his years of pilgrimage. Okay,
thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm Lorenzo Zaccaria, and I thought it might have been of some interest for some of you, or at least I hope, to take a step back from Howard Carter to go and see how was the narration, the description, the mythos that formed around, that got created around ancient Egypt. As we are going to see, it was something that existed since antiquity, since ancient Greek. Of course, for the experts in this room that delved their days all day long in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamian civilization, ancient Greece and Rome are something scarcely ancient, is almost yesterday, but at the very least, they have plenty about Egypt. And actually, Egypt is something shared by both Greek and Roman canon and the Jewish Bible, even though, as you probably know, the Torah, and particularly the Exodus, is characterized by quite a heavy Egyptophobia for obvious reason. And here is what how the Greeks describes Egypt. Herodotus wrote on Egypt, Egypt has many more wonders than many other civilizations, and then he later felt the need to add another important detail. Egyptians are extremely religious. Those are already two basic elements, and then let's add another, said by Plato. In Phaedrus, the dialogue, Socrates says, or even better, Plato makes Socrates says that writing had been invented by Egyptians, by Thoth, a god of the Egyptian pantheon. Of course, let me point out something obvious. There is a difference between what was believed to be truth and what is actually truth. I concern myself with the first, and I leave the latter to this room full of Champollions. Now, so these are three elements that we are going to see are going to be recurrent for quite some time. Here is a definition of hieroglyphs made by the author Siculus. And another detail quite important, this, of course, Siculus did not write in Latin, he wrote in Greek, and this is a Latin translation made by Bracciolini, a member of the first generation of humanists during the Renaissance. He said that non syllabarum compositione aut litteris verba eorum exprimuntur. Their words are not structured in syllables nor characters. This is one of the first definitions of hieroglyphs that we are going to see, but as I was saying, this is a link with the humanists. Renaissance in general had been a period of who coveted a great fascination for Egypt and everything that they thought was orbiting around it. And basically, the idea, their description of Egypt that was created starting from the text they read from the Greek and the Latin, was mediated basically by two books, which were the Hieroglyphica of Horapollon, found by a Roman priest on an island in the Aegean CEC in 1419, and the translation of the Corpus Hermeticum by Marsilio Ficino, a collection of writings thought to be developed by the mythological figure of Hermes Trismegistus that we see here represented, again represented as the inventor of writing and law. And in the inscription there is written here, that is in the Cathedral of Siena, in the pavement of the Cathedral of Siena, and he is presented as the master of Moses. As in the Bible, Moses is presented as knowledgeable of the arts and the knowledges of the Egyptians. And let's add an important element, a misconception that was carried on until their final decipherment of the hieroglyph, which is that Egyptian writings are not supposed to be read. They are scripta non parlata, which means they do not have any phonetical meaning with them. And this is the reason for which you may understand they covered so great fascination for Platonism, Neoplatonism, and them, because it was thought to be a system of writing of pure thought. They were their words that collect the reader, the possessor of this knowledge, hidden knowledge, to the abstract world of ideas. Now, one of the most peculiar and eerie production of the Renaissance is the Hypnerotomachia Polyphili, a book whose title literally translates as The Erotic Struggle of Polyphilo While Dreaming. Usually is translated as The Dream of Polyphilo, made by the Italian friar Francesco Colonna in the 80s of 15th century, written in northern Italian vernacular, trying to mimicking Latin syntax. It is a book who narrates a allegorical initiation in the arts of love of the protagonist Polyphilo, who has fallen in love with the nymph Polia. And in his journey, he witnessed many wonders. The author described them meticulously. And among them, there is this one who had particular great fame, is the statue of the elephant and the obelisk. Polyphilo arrived in a valley with a temple in it, an enormous temple with a dome shaped like a pyramid. In front of this temple, there is a roundabout with some statues in it, amongst whom there is this statue, an elephant with an obelisk on his back. And on the obelisk, there are hieroglyphi, ovvero caratteri aegyptici. Now, a particular copy of this book, and I apologize because I wasn't able to show you some image, is collected and is conserved at the Library of Siena, and this particular because it has a handful of handwritten notes, side notes, made by a reader who really was invested, really wanted to follow what the author was trying to say. And in this very passage, he underlined hieroglyphi, and he noted hieroglyphi hoc est scriptura sacra. Those are, this is a sacred writing. Now, so we have this image that had a huge fortune later. It's probably one of the most famous of this book. The second one is took directly from the book itself. It was printed by none himself than Aldo Manuzio in Venice in 1499. The first one in Sicily is Catania, the main square of Catania is Uliotru, the elephant. The third is in Rome, made by Bernini. So we are in the full of Baroque era. And the latter is the French translation of the Hypnerotomachia Polyphili, Le Songe de Polyphile, made by Jean Martin in the 15th century. Now, most commenters present this as an union between the elephant being symbol, allegory of feral instincts, and while the obelisk, of course, stands for Egypt, which means, again, religion, everything that's mysteric. So we have this union between heroism and mysticism. Now, Renaissance was so invested by Egyptology, their way of describing Egypt, that an entire literary genre was developed around it, trying to mimicking hieroglyphical scripture. Here is Andrea Alciato Emblemata, the first one of this kind, where the author tried to form a sort of experimentation between illustration and moral and philosophical poetry. Is a sort of, if you want, a proto-comic book of the Renaissance, si parva licet. But since the main aim of my intervention is Verdi's Aida, to see what's changed there, let's go and see what music presented in this with this description of Egypt. Of course, since the clock is ticking, I don't want to steal too much of your time. I don't want to lose too much time on this, but just please note this. This is Mozart, the Zauberflute, the magic flute. We are more or less in the second half of the 18th century, but the discourse, the idea of Egypt has remained more or less the same. Ancient Egypt was most surely a civilization full with wonderful monuments, history. They were probably they were most certainly invested all day long thinking about religion. They were bearer of a hidden knowledge, but the heck with them, we are not able to read them because they had that strange writing. Why didn't they wrote in Latin as everyone does? But something changed with Verdi, as we are going to see. Aida has a new paradigm on Egypt. And why? That was because between Mozart and Verdi, modern Egyptology had come forward and new achievements have been made. Of course, it would be too much to ask of Verdi to be an Egyptologist and to know most of things, to know how to read hieroglyph. And this is the reason why the person who contributed in composing the opera had a key role in it. For starter, the Aida was commissioned by the Khedive of Egypt, which means the Viceroy of Egypt, Ismail Pasha, who really desired having an opera set in ancient Egypt, in the late Empire, made by Giuseppe Verdi. He asked Auguste Marguerite, who was the founder and director of the Museum of Cairo, Egyptologist, who actually wrote the story of Aida, and Camille Duloc, who was a theater manager in Paris, already had worked with Verdi, with Don Carlos, who functioned as a sort of middleman between everyone involved. They tried to convince Verdi to compose this opera. Now, it has been a progress quite troublesome. We are in 1870. It is a common idea that it was commissioned for the inauguration of the Suez Canal. That is not true. It was made for the inauguration of the Cairo Opera House, but we are more or less in that time period, 1870. Now, let me remind also that 1870 we are in the middle of the Franco-Prussian War, and for this reason, the stage was postponed of a year because all the costume had blocked in Paris under siege of the Prussians. So it has been troublesome, and Verdi at first wasn't of the idea of writing an Egyptian set opera, even though he already made one set in an historical scenery, which was Nabucco, which was his first great success, continental success. Now, once they got Verdi to wrote it, everything works, things started, and amongst the things that I could present to you, one in particular would I would like to talk about, which is the triumphal march who thunders in the middle of the second act of the opera. Now, for those who do not know the plot, it's basically a love story in a sort of Romeo and Juliet fashion, where the Capuletti Montecchi are Aida, a young Ethiopian princess brought as slave to the Egyptian court, and Radames, a young, brave soldier who enters the stage at first by singing "Io quel guerriero fossi." Oh, if I were that soldier, I would love to lead an army. I would cover myself in honor. That would be awesome. And when he actually got to do that, we are here. We are at the moment of the triumphal march. But the moment of military victory is bittersweet for the listener, because he knows that his military victory means the end of his love story, the beginning of the end for his love story, because it became impossible between the two of them. Now, this is stressed by the choice of instrumentation of Verdi, who decided to pick something special. And it has been made possible by the help of Auguste Mariette, who was the Egyptologist who advised and helped him. And they made the Egyptian trumpets. Now, one important detail of this is that the instruments do not play in the cave of the orchestra. They are on stage. They are actually part of the scenery, which means Verdi needed an historical reproduction of what might have been possible in an Egyptian set. But here was a problem. An historical reproduction of those instruments were supposed to play modern melody, of course. And once you have the trumpets made, the long tube, any length, they tried many, weren't able to reach the higher pitches that Verdi's needed. If you think how it is made, a trumpet is just a sort of a tube that may resonate the breath flow of the musician. For this reason, when you have only one tube, the limit range of the notes you can reach is limited. And in this case, Verdi needed to reach two notes in particular, which are a D and F in a E-flat key. So how they did? They sort of cheated in a way. They added a piston in a way of having two circuits for the breath to flow. A piston that then, during the stage, were supposed to be hidden by the player with his hand, or either a little flag. And this was a part. So they developed this special instrument for only this kind of play, and still today it is. If you go and see modern plays on the internet or even in live stage, there still is that instrument. Usually they do not tend to hide it anymore because everyone knows it. Now, this is it, and to end my intervention, I thought it might be nice to return to the argument of our conference, as everyone will have understood by now. 100 years ago, yesterday, Howard Carter found the tomb of Tutankhamun and his royal chamber, and inside his royal chamber, many precious and untouched artifacts were found, amongst which there were two Egyptian trumpets, one made out of copper, one made out of silver. Now, in 1939, the year of Carter's demise, they actually got them played by James Tapper for BBC Radio. Now, it would have been too much to ask of him to play Verdi. Now we know it would not have been possible. He played just some arpeggios, some little tune for little more than a minute in order to not ruin the artifacts. But still, I thought it was a nice, it was a sort of drawing a nice link between that antiquity, that ancient Egypt, not anymore a vague, undetermined Egypt, and our contemporaneity. Of course, this had been possible only with this long historical procedure of trials and error, trying to understand what that was like, what they were saying. From Plato and Neoplatonism, we reach humanism and Renaissance. From there, we reach the Baroque with people like Athanasius Kicker, who gave the first systematic interpretation of the hieroglyph. An interpretation famously wrong, but still worth to mention. Then we reach a person like Sir Thomas Browne, who again gave many, many reflections around the hieroglyph, as we have done today. And then we finally reach Jean-François Champollion. So we are finally able to read those hieroglyphs. We read Howard Carter and we read James Tupper, and with this, I thank you.